I'd like for you to talk about the role that art and writing played in sustaining you for almost 2 decades on death row in an Arkansas prison.
Art and writing was, they were a huge part of what allowed me to keep my sanity. You know, in there you have to find something to give you a reason to keep moving forward, to give you some sort of momentum. Most people, whenever they go into prison, begin to stagnate. They stop developing as human beings. So if you're going to continue to grow, you have to find some way to force yourself to do it. And for me, that's a lot of what art was about. I tried just about every medium at one point or another while I was in there. I did everything from collage to painting to building things out of pilfered tongue depressors that came from prison nurses, prison infirmary, just about everything. But the one thing I loved more than anything else was writing. I've loved writing ever since I was probably 12 years old. It's like it scratches some sort of itch deep inside you that you can't really get to with other art forms. And also, when you're in prison as long as I was, you know, I was in prison for a little over 18 years, you start to lose your memories. You know, for example, I could remember that pizza had been my favorite food, but I couldn't actually remember what it tasted like anymore. So I would sit down and start writing all of my memories, my pre-prison memories, just to try to preserve them, almost as an act of engraving them in my brain, going back and reliving them over and over, so that I could see these memories, I could see these places I loved, these people that I loved. I would see those things for days at a time and not see the prison around me.
So writing was a way of remembering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a huge, huge part of my life in prison.
Cool. I also wanted to ask you, I know you're a big Stephen King fan, but outside of the horror genre, were there other books important to you? Did you read any prison narratives?
Now, the last thing in the world that I wanted to read was prison narratives. You know, people would send me things like books on Nelson Mandela or John McCain when he was a prisoner of war, or you know, Reuben Hurricane Carter, and they would say, you know, you might want to read this. I think you can identify with it. And I would think, what makes you think I want to read about prison?
Rather
you
than
know,
a comic book or something.
I'm already in prison. Most of the books, as time went on, I started to lose more and more of my eyesight. So I had to narrow down my focus on what I was reading. I had to read things as the years progressed that would help me through day-to-day life. Most of those things were books on different meditation techniques and different energy work techniques, things like Reiki and Qigong. That's what I focused on. That's what played a huge role in my life outside of fiction.
Yeah. Would you say, because you were also a big fan of music, and when you were writing, did music in any way help with the writing, help influence the writing in some kind of way?
Absolutely. With music, what it does is sort of sets a mood, sets a tone. If you want to write in a particular way, you're trying to invoke a particular mood in your reader, music gets you into that mood. You have to listen to the music that invokes that mood into you and then let it flow through your pen so that when people read it, they feel what it is you're feeling at the time you're writing it, and music is a huge part of that process.
Did you have access to music?
Very little in prison. You get a small AM/FM radio if you can afford it, but I was up under 3 stories of concrete and steel, so there's very, very little radio reception. What little you get is going to be stuff like you know, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, things that I, for the most part, had no interest in listening to whatsoever. So what I would do is, you have to listen to the music in your head, you know, the things that you loved when you were out. You sort of play those over and over again in your head, and after a while they get to sound even better than the real thing sometimes.
I wanted to also ask you, what's it like being back in the South?
You know, I really don't know yet. I can't say. Usually things like this, being back in the South, it's going to take me a while to process it, to digest it, to be able to articulate it, really. It's a very weird experience. I came back to the South once before, a little over a year ago. I came to Nashville, and it was a very, very traumatic thing. I wasn't ready for it yet. It made me incredibly sick. My temperature went up to like 103, 104 degrees, and Lori thought she was going to have to call an ambulance. I couldn't, I kept thinking, I'm back in Memphis, and I would have to keep reminding myself, no, this is Nashville. But even then, that didn't really help. You know, it was just being in the South. It felt like this tar pit that's just going to close over you and you're never going to be able to get out again. It's just going to swallow you up. I was in shock and trauma for probably 6 months after I got out of prison. And that contributed to a lot of that. Now, I'm a lot stronger than I was even a year ago. And I came into it this time with more curiosity than fear. And I look around at things, even in the short time I've been here already, at the trees, at the ground. And there's something about this place that just feels so rich. You know, even flying in on a plane, flying over the Mississippi River and looking at it, it just has a very dense, rich, almost chocolatey texture to the energy here. So I think it's going to be an interesting experience.
Are you working on new material?
I am. Lori and I, well, we are actually. Lori and I are working on a book together now. It's going to be our next project. It's going to be about our relationship when I was in prison, as opposed to the case itself. A lot of it will be based on our correspondence over the years. We recently got all of our letters. We had them shipped to Massachusetts, where we live now, and it was over between 110 and 120 pounds of letters that we had written back and forth to each other over the years, a little over 5,000 letters. And we're going to have to go back and revisit those, look at how we developed over the years together and individually, and work that into a narrative.
Excellent. I have to ask you, how are you dealing with being essentially a contemporary legend?
I don't know. You know,
you are, in case.
That was what I was going to say. Nobody's ever said that to me before.
Well, you are.
That's the first time I've heard that. You know, so far it's been really, really good. I haven't had anybody come up to me and say anything that was less than 100% positive in the whole time I've been out. It's been a very, very welcoming thing, which is so, in a way, it's still so odd for me, just because before I went to prison, I was such a huge outcast, had so few friends. Nobody really wanted anything to do with me just because I didn't fit into the, you know, small town, hardcore conservative mold of where I came from. So I went from sort of being completely ostracized to, in a lot of ways, welcomed and accepted on this really big scale. And it's a huge difference. And I gotta say, being accepted is a hell of a lot better than being ostracized.
I wanted to get out of Saltella from the time I was probably 6, something like that.
You're the only one who did.
Yeah, I suppose there ain't that many, but yeah, and I just felt like, I mean, I was always playing music, and the more I got into it, the more I just felt like there's a whole world out there, and I'm not in it. And to my credit, to their credit, my parents were really, they're relatively sophisticated. Like for people in a town of 700 people in Mississippi, my parents were pretty cool, and they would take us faraway places, and my dad would talk about faraway things. My dad made me read Mein Kampf. I remember before I'd started first grade.
Excellent.
Because he wanted me to understand, because he said there was so much educational information in that, and he goes, and you shouldn't be biased against it just because people see that as the enemy or the other. Like, to me, the thing to do was to go. I mean, I had a good, you know, opportunity to go to college and stuff here in the state, and I bailed on it. And I went for the idea of being a musician and being my first career was being a studio musician in Los Angeles. And I did great at that, and it worked. But I mean, that was just a go for broke move. But I only really noticed that in hindsight. Like, to me, these all felt like obvious steps. This is exactly what has to happen. Like, I got to do this. And the notion of failing at it didn't seem that scary either. I don't think I thought about it that way, but I don't think I was considering failing that much. But it didn't scare me much either. So I go up this pedal, and I just come up with the weirdest sound. I get this super extreme, doesn't fit a Leonard Cohen sound going. And we just run the song down a couple times, and I got this little part going, and Dean, the real, the grown-up guitar player sitting next to me, I look over at him at some point, and he's going, don't do that. He's saying, don't do that to me. And I'm like, but I'm thinking to myself, no, this is awesome. He's wrong, man. So I stuck with it. And then, we run through the song a couple times. The engineer comes on the talk back, and he goes through each dude one at a time. He says, man, everybody's sounding great. Kirk, your snare, perfect, nice tuning. Bass player, Lee Sklar, you sound great. He's going around to everybody telling them they sound great. And he goes, Dennis, he goes, your sound is a little bit thin. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going for. He goes, okay. And you can just tell he's going, okay, like you just guaranteed yourself not to be on the record when it's finished, you know what I mean? But I'm sticking with it. And so Leonard comes out and sings with us, and we do a couple of takes. And then we go in to listen to the playback, and they're playing it back, and I can't hear myself. The producer and engineer have gone, okay, this is sounding pretty good. That sounds horrible, so turn that way down, He's not listening to us, so fuck him, we'll go with the shit that's working. And Leonard's there, and he was married to, or his girlfriend or whatever was Rebecca De Mornay at the time. So Rebecca was there, and I knew her through him, And they were both being super sweet. It's all good. And the song's playing back, and it gets to the end, and everybody's like, yeah, it sounds great. Everybody's saying all that kind of stuff. And Leonard goes, where's that weird little squeaky part? Where's that weird squeaky part? And they go, what? And he goes, I think Dennis was doing it. It sounds like a squirrel or something. And they go, oh, yeah, it's here. And he goes, can we hear that a little louder? And so they start the song from the start, you know what I mean? So they play it a couple, 3 times until he's got it the loudest thing. And they play the song through like that, and it gets to the end of the song, and Leonard came over and kissed me.
Wow.
And he goes, you just made this song. You just made it. You made it so special. Thank you. And you can just see the other musicians just going, oh, Dennis, you just...
That's fucking cool.
When I came, when I decided to move away from Los Angeles, I knew I wanted to move to a higher quality of life environment, and I knew I wanted to move back to the South, but I didn't know where. And to me, the highest quality of life that I'd seen in cities or towns were university towns. Right. Because then you get sophistication, but you get a small kind of environment. People get to know each other. There's walking. There are these things that make life better. And so what I decided to do is every chance I got, I'd go stay a weekend in different places that seemed interesting from afar. Like I already knew Austin really well, but I considered Austin. I went and stayed in Athens for a couple nights. I went and stayed in, like Chapel Hill, a couple, those kind of places in the South, like hip enclaves of music and hipster folk. Those oasis spots that happen in different. And like when I came and hung out in Oxford, I came and was hanging out, and I went to the record store, did different things, and I spent the night. And the next morning, my dad came over from Saltillo and met me for breakfast. And we went to this place that used to be on the square, Smitty's.
I remember that place.
Yeah, and I believe, was it Miss Eileen? Miss Helen? Something was the lady, I forget her name, but the owner lady. And she was checking us out. And so we're checking out, and she's just being real sweet. She says, oh, honey, are you a student here? And I go, oh, no, ma'am. I said, education and I parted ways many years ago, never to cross paths again. And she laughs, and she goes, and my dad then says, he's considering moving here. She goes, oh, well, if you're considering moving here, there's something you should know about Oxford. And I go, oh, what? She goes, well, in Oxford, we tolerate our eccentrics, but we don't suffer fools. And I was just like, I think I may have found the right place. Like this idea that she saw that as like the fucking poster, that would be the thing that's on the sign when you drive into town. Like, now who would make the town, like, I got to figure Faulkner's at the front of the snowplow on.
Well, I think you once told me that part of your reason for moving here had to do with Barry Hannock. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was big. Like, is what put Oxford on my list of places to hang out and check out. the Oxford American was going good. And my little brother still lives in Saltillo. And he started mailing me copies of the Oxford American when they'd come out. And I was kind of blown away with it. There was particularly one issue that had a big article by Susan Lee, Tim Lee's wife. And it was photos at one of the local kind of stock car tracks, dirt tracks. There's all these amazing pictures she had taken at that, and I was like, oh, that's so good. That just was resonating to me. And then there's a Mississippi guy, lives in California, who I was around a lot when I was a musician, especially named Glenn Ballard, who's been real successful as a songwriter and producer and shit. He's real successful. Glenn's super nice guy too. And Glenn, when I started kind of talking to him about it, I go, I'm trying to think about South. He goes, oh man, you got to check out Oxford, because that dude Barry Hanna's from there. And I go, who's Barry Hanna? He goes, oh man, he's like the best short story writer in the world. He goes, I think he's my favorite writer there is. He goes, he loaned me a couple of Barry's books. So I read those, and then I had these Oxford Americans, and that added up. Right. All that together really resonated. The singer in the band Modest Mouse, Isaac Brock, I really love working with him, and he's really intense. Like, he's just on his own, within himself. It's not about me or other people, it's just he's an intense dude. And I remember the first record we did together, and we were sitting around in Memphis, actually, at Easley, doing vocals. And Isaac didn't really have lyrics. And so he hadn't really told me he didn't have lyrics. So he would go out there to sing and then just freak out. And at one point he came, the first night of that, it really was difficult to figure out what was happening, but I also felt like we were on the verge of capturing some good shit, because this was a very caustic, freaking out person who's trying to get somewhere. And at one point I was playing something back to him that I thought
What was he freaking out about?
I think just that he didn't have lyrics, and that he knew he had to have them now. And so he would go out to the mic and just yell, or just do gibberish, whatever, and just doing super intense stuff. And at first I didn't know what to do with that. At first I'm kind of like, yeah, cool, Isaac, let's go again. I go, it sounds good, and he's like, that doesn't sound good, I got shit, I'm a fucking asshole, he's just freaking out, And then I start to realize, oh, he wants me to interact with him about the lyrics, As I figured that out, we figured out a way to make it work. Like, I would listen to him rant, and I would make note of things that seemed interesting. And then he'd come in and I'd go, you got to hear this one bit. This bit was really cool you did. And he'd go, really, you sure? Fuck. And you'd play it for him. And he goes, yeah, that is pretty fucking good. Let me go back out there. And he would build on that. But at some point I was playing the song back for him and we were doing this interaction. I was facing the console and I started to smell something, smelled weird. And as I turned around, I realized he set my hair on fire. And so my hair's kind of burning right here. And so I kind of get that put out. And I just go, fuck you, man. I go, you think that I'm a pussy and that's going to bug me? I go, I don't care what you do. You got to go back out there and sing, motherfucker. I mean, you're just fucking putting off the real shit. It's all you're doing right now, and I know it. So don't even think I'm afraid of you, man. You just go back out there and fight. He goes, fuck you, and he goes back out there. Man, we got great, good stuff happened. It was the first, we've worked together many times after that. So we knew both that there was a good...
Did you get on well with the guy from the Smiths?
Yeah, Johnny's great. Great musician.
He's good. Yeah.
Choosing music as the way you make your living, you got to be self-loathing on some level to do that. You put out all you can, every chance you get, and then you sit around and hope somebody sends you a check for it someday. It's just like the silliest structure.
I wanted to ask you, what's the most obnoxious question you've ever been asked about being the daughter of Jerry Lee Lewis?
What's it like to be the daughter of
Oh,
Jerry Lee
sure.
Lewis?
Oh.
What's it like? And I give a different answer every time. I just make one up.
What are some of the answers you've made up?
Depends on who's talking. If I want to get them out quick, I say, it's great, thanks, bye. I managed him for 11 years, and I lived with him, so I managed the household, the dogs, the cooking, the grocery shopping, and then going on the road, traveling to Europe once or twice a year, and
How's that?
oh my God, it's so much fun looking back. But when you're there, the ripping and the running and the going and the packing and the unpacking and the get to the show.
Be on time.
Yeah. Get in the car. Let's get out of the car. Go to it can be really it's stressful, very, very, very stressful. But that's just this business. It's just hurry up, go get on stage. So it's. People wonder, I don't know if people wonder, I don't wonder why people in this business, in the music industry or in the entertainment industry are on drugs. I know why they were on drugs.
What did you do before you started managing your dad?
I was living in Nashville, and I was recording and performing, put together a band, and was going to try to get a record deal. I was in my 30s. I was doing a bluesy, folk kind of country music, and they didn't know what to do with me. I was not going to get a record deal. Okay, it wasn't going to happen. It's just like you're too old. Which they never said that, but I knew I was, because if you're not 12 and have earning potential for several decades, yeah. So, and the music is this Memphis thing, but they were like, we don't get it. Well, if you don't get it, then, you can kiss my ass. I'll take just like my daddy said, he went to Nashville before he came to Memphis back in the 50s. And they said, well, can you play a guitar? He said, yeah, but I play the piano. And he ended up telling them, and I've heard him tell the story, he said, I told him, he said, I hitchhiked into this town, and I could hitchhike out of this town. See you later. And so he didn't like Nashville any more than I do. Being raised as the daughter of Jerry Lee Lewis, I didn't know how to develop an ego. It was all about him, and I don't mean that necessarily derogatory towards him, although he could have been more attentive as a father, but it was always about Jerry Lee. And when I was very young, before my parents divorced, I did have that ego. I was, running around 6 and 7 years old, surrounded by musicians in and out of the house all the time, and I could hold my own with them. But something happened when my parents divorced, and I wasn't around the business anymore. We moved away. I led a more normal life. My mother wanted me to lead a more normal life.
You went with your mother?
I went with my mother. We went to Atlanta. And I went to a public school. And whenever that Lewis would come out in me, it was pretty crazy. And by the time I was 13, I was still acting a little crazy, so she sent me to boarding school, and I had no choice but to fit in, because they would discipline me like I had never known discipline before, because my daddy didn't discipline me. It was like, whatever you want, baby. You're my baby, you're my heart, you can have anything you want. So, gee, you think that made for a spoiled brat? Maybe a little bit.
I did want to ask you, what was your reaction to the movie they made based on your mom's memoir, I believe, Great Balls of Fire?
Yeah.
What was your reaction when that came out?
And I will talk about that.
Okay.
Completely openly and candidly. That movie, a lot of people come up to me and tell me they loved the movie. But that was a story about my parents. And there's a love story there that has not been told and that no one really, really knows. And that movie was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Dennis is very sweet, but between the writing and the direction, I thought it was just a really, really bad
Portrayal of
representation.
your dad.
It was a very bad
Or your parents.
What do
representation.
you think was the most inaccurate thing that just jumped out?
There wasn't like when my daddy. There's a scene where my daddy is driving up to pick my mother up at school, and they break into song and they start dancing. all the kids from school start dancing around. It's like, what in the hell is this? Terrence Malick. I don't know if you know who he is. Okay, you do. He wrote a screenplay. And you know, it's very dark. You know how Terrence Malick is. Very dark and true, I think. I have not gotten my hands on it. I haven't read it. But from what I've heard, it kind of explores this love story between my mother and my father. She was 13. She was his cousin. But when he saw her, he fell in love with her. And they were together for 13 years. And there's something very special there. Very, very special with all that they went through and with what it did to his career. And he never blamed my mother. He always stuck to his guns and said, I chose her as my wife, and whoever doesn't like it, well, that's your problem. I have not written my own memoir. I've been asked to, and I'm really debating on whether I'll ever do that. I got mad and said, yeah, I'm going to write a book. And then I went, no, I'm not going to write a book because I'm mad. And I really don't know that it's necessary. Rick Bragg is writing a book with my daddy right now. And that's a deal that I put together while I was still managing my daddy. I'm extremely excited about what Rick Bragg can do and Jerry Lee Lewis can do to tell Jerry Lee Lewis's story.
Right.
That should be amazing. For a brief period, very bad management killed the whole thing, but it was children of entertainers. It was me, Peggy Lynn, who's Loretta Lynn's daughter, one of the twins,
Right.
and Cindy Cash, Johnny Cash's daughter. And it's so funny because I look like my daddy, Peggy looked like Loretta, and Cindy looked like Johnny. It was like, God, this is weird even for us. We did a photo shoot and it was hilarious. It was back in the 80s. And when I met these girls, we just had an instant friendship, and I finally, for the first time in my life, met somebody who understood what my life was like. None of my friends knew what it was like to have a famous daddy. They had no idea. And Peggy understood what it was like. Her mama's Loretta Lynn. Cindy's daddy's Johnny Cash. They understood, and so we just had this rapport, and it was really, really good for me to have that kind of friendship.
Sometimes you hear about like children of celebrities trying to distance themselves to, have their own identity. Did you ever feel like you had to do that to be your own person, or did you just roll with it?
I always have been proud to be my father's daughter. I'm lost in it. Like I said, I'm still sort of groping for my identity a lot of the time. But I've always been so proud of my daddy and my entire family. But with my daddy, with his music and everything, yeah. No, I've never tried to deny who I was. I have, when I was in school, I learned early on that it attracted attention, and not always good. I would have girls be nasty to me and mean to me. And so the next school I went to, I didn't tell anybody who I was. Not because I was ashamed, but I just didn't want to have to hear the stuff that they were going to say to me that I knew they were going to say. So I kind of go incognito sometimes, just because, not because I'm embarrassed or trying to. I can have my identity. I think I can have my identity and still be his daughter. My God, I'm 49 years old. I need to have that in place by now.